Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet one at Riverside High School. At 17, she kept to herself, focusing on her studies and avoiding the drama that seemed to follow her classmates everywhere. Her dark hair was usually pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she preferred wearing oversized hoodies that helped her blend into the background. Most students barely noticed her, which was exactly how she liked it. The trouble started on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October. Sarah had stayed late to finish a chemistry lab report in the empty classroom when she realized she'd left her backpack in the girls' locker room after PE class. The hallways were mostly deserted, with only a few students lingering for after-school activities. She made her way to the locker room, expecting it to be empty like the rest of the building. As she pushed open the heavy metal door, Sarah heard voices coming from the back corner near the showers. She recognized them immediately: Jessica Chun and her group of friends who had made Sarah's life difficult since freshman year. Jessica was the type of girl who seemed to have everything handed to her: popularity, good grades, and parents who bought her whatever she wanted. But beneath her perfect exterior was a mean streak that she directed toward anyone she considered beneath her. "I can't believe she actually thought she could sit at our table," Jessica was saying to her friends, her voice dripping with disgust. "Like, who does she think she is?" Sarah froze near the entrance, realizing they were talking about her. During lunch earlier that day, she had mistakenly sat at what she thought was an empty table, not knowing it was Jessica's usual spot. The confrontation had been brief, but humiliating, with Jessica loudly telling her to move while half the cafeteria watched. "She's so weird," added Madison, Jessica's best friend and constant sidekick. "Always sitting alone, never talking to anyone. I heard she doesn't even have any social media accounts. What kind of teenager doesn't have Instagram?" Sarah quietly moved toward her locker, hoping to grab her backpack and leave without being noticed. But as she opened the metal door, it let out a loud squeak that echoed through the tiled room. The conversation stopped abruptly. Well, Jessica's voice carried across the locker room. "Look who decided to show up." Sarah's heart began to race, but she kept her focus on gathering her things. She had learned long ago that the best strategy with bullies like Jessica was to avoid engagement entirely. Give them nothing to work with, and they usually got bored and moved on to easier targets. "I'm talking to you, freak," Jessica called out, her footsteps echoing as she approached with her two friends flanking her like bodyguards. Sarah zipped up her backpack and turned to leave, but Jessica stepped directly into her path. Up close, Sarah could see the anger in Jessica's eyes, though she couldn't understand what had triggered it. They barely interacted on a normal day. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" Jessica said, crossing her arms. "Walking around here like you own the place, sitting wherever you want without asking permission." "I didn't know it was your table," Sarah said quietly, trying to step around Jessica. "I was just looking for somewhere to eat my lunch." "That's your problem right there," Jessica snapped. "You don't know your place. You think you can just do whatever you want without consequences." Madison and the third girl, whose name Sarah couldn't remember, had positioned themselves to block the other exit routes. Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd had countless times during her childhood when bigger kids had cornered her on playgrounds or in school hallways. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the anxiety building inside her. "I'll just leave you alone, and we can pretend this never happened." Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, it's too late for that. You embarrassed me in front of everyone today. Do you have any idea who my father is? What he could do to your family if I asked him to?" Sarah knew that Jessica's father was some kind of businessman with connections around town, but she had never paid much attention to the social hierarchies that seemed so important to her classmates. Her own background was complicated in ways that most people couldn't imagine, and she had learned to value different things than wealth or social status. "I apologize if I embarrassed you," Sarah said, meaning it. "That wasn't my intention at all. Can I please just go home now?" Instead of accepting the apology, Jessica stepped closer, her face flushed with anger that seemed disproportionate to the simple lunch table incident. There was something else driving her hostility, though Sarah couldn't figure out what it was. "You know what I think?" Jessica said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I think you need to learn some respect. I think you need to understand what happens to people who cross me." Before Sarah could react, Jessica's hands shot forward and grabbed her by the throat. The attack was so sudden and unexpected that Sarah's first instinct was complete shock. In all her years of dealing with bullies, none had ever escalated to physical violence this quickly. Jessica's grip tightened around Sarah's windpipe, and she began applying pressure. "Maybe if you can't breathe for a while, you'll remember to stay in your lane next time," she hissed. The other two girls looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. They had probably expected some verbal harassment or maybe a shove, but this was escalating beyond what they had signed up for. Still, they remained frozen, unsure how to handle the situation. Sarah's training kicked in before her conscious mind had time to process what was happening. Years of muscle memory and instinct took over as her body responded to the threat. Her hands moved with lightning speed and precision, breaking Jessica's grip using a technique that required minimal force but maximum leverage. In one fluid motion, Sarah grabbed Jessica's wrists, twisted them in opposite directions, and applied just enough pressure to force her to release her hold. Jessica gasped in surprise and pain as Sarah simultaneously stepped back and used her leg to sweep Jessica's feet out from under her. Jessica hit the ground hard, landing on her back with a loud thud that echoed through the locker room. She lay there for a moment, stunned and gasping, while Madison and the other girls stared in complete shock at what they had just witnessed. The entire encounter had lasted less than 10 seconds, but it felt like time had slowed to a crawl. Sarah stood over Jessica, her breathing steady and controlled, while her attacker struggled to understand what had just happened to her. "How did you?" Jessica began, her voice shaky as she tried to sit up. Sarah realized she had made a mistake. In defending herself, she had revealed skills that no ordinary high school student should possess. The way she had broken the chokehold, the precision of her movements, the calm efficiency with which she had neutralized the threat, it all pointed to training that went far beyond anything a teenager would normally have access to. Madison finally found her voice. "What the hell was that? How did you do that to her?" Sarah's mind raced as she tried to figure out how to explain what had just happened without revealing the truth about her background. The secret she had guarded so carefully for the past 2 years was threatening to unravel because of one moment of instinct. I took some self-defense classes," she said weakly, knowing it sounded inadequate even as the words left her mouth. Jessica had managed to sit up, rubbing her wrists where Sarah had applied pressure. The anger in her eyes had been replaced by something else, fear mixed with confusion and a growing curiosity about the girl she thought she knew. "That wasn't self-defense," Jessica said slowly, her voice still shaky. "That was something else entirely. No teenager moves like that unless they've had serious training. Military training." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sarah felt her carefully constructed new life beginning to crumble around her. She had worked so hard to become just another anonymous high school student, to bury the past that had shaped her into someone entirely different. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah said, but she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. Jessica's eyes narrowed as she studied Sarah's face, looking for tells and clues that might reveal the truth. Despite her privileged background, Jessica was intelligent and observant. She had seen enough action movies and military documentaries to recognize the difference between basic self-defense and advanced combat training. "You're lying," Jessica said, pushing herself to her feet with Madison's help. "Nobody learns to fight like that in a community center self-defense class. That was professional-level stuff." Sarah picked up her backpack and headed for the door, hoping to escape before the conversation could go any further. But Jessica's voice stopped her in her tracks. "I'm going to find out who you really are," Jessica called after her. "Whatever you're hiding, I'm going to figure it out." As Sarah left the locker room, she knew her quiet life at Riverside High School was over. The secret she had protected for so long was beginning to surface, and there was no way to put it back once it was out. For the first time in 2 years, She felt the weight of her past pressing down on her shoulders, threatening to crush the normal teenage existence she had tried so hard to build. Walking through the empty hallways toward the parking lot, Sarah's mind drifted back to a time when situations like this were just another day at the office, when split-second decisions and combat reflexes were the difference between life and death, when she was known by a different name and carried responsibilities that most people couldn't imagine. She had thought those days were behind her forever. But as she climbed in her beat-up Honda Civic and drove home through the rain, Sarah realized that some parts of yourself never truly go away. They just wait, hidden beneath the surface, until circumstances force them back into the light. The next morning arrived gray and cold, matching Sarah's mood as she sat in her car in the school parking lot, debating whether to go inside. She had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, knowing that Jessica Chin wouldn't let the previous day's incident go. Girls like Jessica thrived on drama and mystery, and Sarah had inadvertently given her both. Through the windshield, she watched students streaming into the building, their voices carrying across the parking lot as they discussed weekend plans and upcoming tests. Normal teenage concerns that felt foreign to Sarah, even after 2 years of trying to fit into this world. She envied their innocence, their ability to worry about things like pop quizzes and social media drama, instead of the life and death situations that had once defined her existence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chun, the elderly neighbor who had become something of a grandmother figure to her. "Hope you have a good day at school, dear. Remember what we talked about. Sometimes the hardest thing is letting people see who you really are." Sarah smiled despite her anxiety. Mrs. Chun had been the first person to show her genuine kindness when she'd moved to this quiet suburb of Denver 2 years ago. The old woman had no idea about Sarah's background, but she had an uncanny ability to offer exactly the right advice at the right moment. Taking a deep breath, Sarah grabbed her backpack and headed into the building. She made it through first period without incident, though she noticed more stares than usual. Word traveled fast in high school, and she suspected that Jessica had already started spreading her version of yesterday's events. During second period English class, Sarah tried to focus on the discussion about The Great Gatsby, but her attention kept drifting to Jessica, who sat 3 rows ahead. The girl kept turning around to look at her, with an expression of intense curiosity that made Sarah's stomach clench with worry. When the bell rang, Sarah quickly gathered her books and headed for the door, but Jessica intercepted her in the hallway. "We need to talk," Jessica said, but her tone was different from the day before. The anger and hostility had been replaced by something that might have been respect, mixed with burning curiosity. "I have nothing to say to you," Sarah replied, trying to step around her. "Maybe not, but I have plenty to say to you," Jessica said, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the cafeteria. "I did some research last night. Want to know what I found?" Sarah's blood turned to ice, but she kept walking, hoping her face didn't betray the panic rising in her chest. "I really don't care what you think you found." Sarah Martinez, Jessica said, reading from her phone, moved to Denver 2 years ago from, well, that's where it gets interesting. There's no record of where you came from. No previous schools, no social media history, no digital footprint at all before you showed up here. They had reached Sarah's locker, and she began working the combination with hands that she hoped weren't visibly shaking. "Maybe I just value my privacy. Or maybe you're not who you say you are," Jessica continued, clearly enjoying the detective work. "I also looked up that move you used on me yesterday. Took me a while, but I found videos of similar techniques. They're used by Special Forces units, Navy SEALs specifically." Sarah slammed her locker shut harder than necessary. "You watch too many movies, Jessica. Not everything is some big conspiracy." But Jessica wasn't backing down. If anything, Sarah's obvious discomfort seemed to fuel her determination. "My dad has connections with the military through his defense contracts. I could ask him to make some calls, see what he can find out about you." The threat hung in the air between them. Sarah knew that if Jessica's father started making inquiries through official channels, her carefully constructed new identity could unravel completely. The people who had helped her disappear had done excellent work, but they couldn't erase everything, especially if someone with the right connection started digging deep enough. "Why does this matter to you so much?" Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled by Jessica's obsession. "So what if I know how to defend myself? Why can't you just leave it alone?" Jessica was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more vulnerable than Sarah had ever heard it. "Because I've never seen anything like what you did yesterday. The way you moved, the confidence, the complete control of the situation. I've been going to self-defense classes for 3 years, and I couldn't even break free from my own grip if someone grabbed me the way I grabbed you." They were walking toward the cafeteria now, and Jessica continued talking as they navigated the crowded hallway. "Do you know what it's like to be scared all the time? To know that if someone really wanted to hurt you, there's nothing you could do to stop them?" Sarah stopped walking and turned to look at Jessica, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Beneath the designer clothes and perfect makeup was a girl who was genuinely afraid. Not of Sarah, but of her own vulnerability in a world that could be dangerous for young women. "I grew up hearing stories about what happens to girls like me," Jessica said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Rich girls who get targeted for kidnapping or worse. My parents hire bodyguards for big events, and they've taught me to be constantly aware of my surroundings. But yesterday, when I grabbed you, I realized that all my self-defense training was useless against someone who really knew what they were doing." Sarah felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. She had been so focused on protecting her own secret that she hadn't considered why Jessica might be so interested in her abilities. The girl wasn't trying to expose her out of malice. She was looking for something Sarah possessed that she desperately wanted for herself. "Even if what you're thinking is true," Sarah said carefully, "it doesn't mean I can help you with whatever you're looking for." "But it does," Jessica insisted. "Don't you see? If you really are who I think you are, then you're exactly the kind of person I need to learn from. Not some weekend warrior instructor at the gym, but someone who's actually been in real situations." They had reached the cafeteria entrance, and Sarah paused, weighing her options. She could continue denying everything and hope that Jessica would eventually lose interest. She could transfer to another school and start over again, though that would mean abandoning the life she had worked so hard to build. Or she could find a way to satisfy Jessica's curiosity without revealing the full truth about her past. "Look," Sarah said finally, "even if I hypothetically had the kind of training you're talking about, there would be very good reasons why someone like that would want to keep it quiet. Reasons that have nothing to do with you or anyone else at this school." Jessica nodded eagerly. "I get that. I'm not trying to cause trouble for you. I want to learn. I want to be able to protect myself the way you can. And what makes you think I'd be willing to teach you anything? Because yesterday, you could have seriously hurt me. With the training you obviously have, you could have broken my arm or worse without even trying. But you didn't. You used exactly enough force to stop the threat, and nothing more. That tells me you're not the kind of person who enjoys hurting people." Sarah was impressed despite herself. Jessica had accurately assessed not just her technical abilities, but her character and restraint. It suggested that underneath the privileged exterior was a sharp intelligence that Sarah had underestimated. They entered the cafeteria and found a quiet corner table away from the main crowd. Sarah picked at her sandwich while Jessica continued making her case. "I've been thinking about this all night," Jessica said. "What if we could help each other? You teach me some real self-defense techniques, and I help protect your secret. I won't dig into your background anymore, and I'll make sure nobody else does either. And why would I trust you to keep your word?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her untouched salad. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because 3 months ago, someone followed me home from school. A man in a dark car who stayed behind me for 6 miles through 4 different turns. When I finally lost him in a crowded shopping center parking lot, I sat in my car and cried for an hour because I realized how helpless I was." Sarah felt her resolve wavering. She recognized the fear in Jessica's voice because she had heard it in her own voice many years ago, back when she was just another scared kid who had learned the hard way that the world could be a dangerous place. Even if I agreed to help you, Sarah said slowly, it would have to be completely private. No one else could know about it. And you'd have to promise to never ask me about my background again. I promise, Jessica said immediately. Whatever happened in your past, whatever brought you here, I don't need to know about it. I just want to learn how to be strong like you. Sarah studied the girl across from her, weighing the risks and benefits of the arrangement. On one hand, training Jessica would mean constant contact with someone who suspected her true identity. On the other hand, it might be the best way to ensure Jessica's silence, while also helping someone who clearly needed it. If we do this, Sarah said, we do it my way. No questions about techniques or where I learned them. You follow my instructions exactly, and you never try to show off what you've learned to anyone else. Jessica nodded eagerly. Absolutely. When do we start? Saturday morning. There's an old martial arts gym on 5th Street that's been closed for 2 years. I'll meet you there at 7 a.m. How will we get inside if it's closed? Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Leave that to me. Just bring workout clothes and be ready to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. As they parted ways after lunch, Sarah felt a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. She was taking a huge risk by agreeing to work with Jessica, but she also sensed that the girl's interest came from a genuine place of need rather than malicious curiosity. That evening, as Sarah sat in her small apartment reviewing the day's events, she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully ordered life was about to become much more complicated. She had spent 2 years learning to be a normal teenager, and now she was voluntarily stepping back toward the world she had tried so hard to leave behind. But as she thought about the fear in Jessica's voice when she described being followed, Sarah realized that maybe her past didn't have to be entirely a burden. Maybe there was a way to use her skills to help someone without compromising her own safety. Maybe being normal was less important than being useful. For the first time since the locker room incident, Sarah felt a sense of purpose that reminded her of why she had become a warrior in the first place. Not for the adrenaline or the glory, but to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Saturday morning couldn't come soon enough. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear with the kind of autumn sunshine that made everything look sharper and more alive. Sarah arrived at the abandoned martial arts gym 15 minutes early, as was her habit from years of military precision. The building sat on a quiet side street, its windows dark and covered with dust, surrounded by weeds that had grown up through cracks in the sidewalk. She had discovered this place during one of her long runs through the city, back when she was still adjusting to civilian life and needed somewhere to practice her forms without curious eyes watching. The owner had died suddenly 2 years ago, and the property had been tied up in legal disputes ever since. It was perfect for her purposes, private, forgotten, and easily accessible to someone with her particular skills. Jessica's car pulled up exactly at 7 a.m., which impressed Sarah. Punctuality was something she valued highly, a remnant from her days when being late could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Jessica stepped out wearing expensive workout gear that looked like it had never seen actual sweat, but her face showed a determination that Sarah found encouraging. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up, Jessica said, looking nervously at the building's abandoned appearance. I keep my promises, Sarah replied, walking toward a side door that was hidden from street view by an overgrown hedge. She produced a small set of tools from her pocket and had the lock open in less than 30 seconds. How did you? Jessica began, then caught herself. Sorry, no questions about your background. Sarah pushed open the door and gestured for Jessica to follow her inside. The gym's interior was exactly as she remembered it. A large open space with mirrors along one wall, heavy bags hanging from the ceiling, and exercise equipment covered in protective tarps. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through dirty windows, but the space had good bones and plenty of room to move. This place is perfect, Jessica said, looking around with obvious appreciation. How did you know about it? I explore a lot when I run, Sarah said, which was technically true even if it wasn't the complete answer. She set down her gym bag and began pulling out equipment, training mats, focus mitts, and other gear she had accumulated over the years. Before we start, Sarah said, I need you to understand something. Real self-defense isn't like what you see in movies. It's not about looking cool or feeling powerful. It's about surviving dangerous situations by any means necessary. That means you might have to do things that feel uncomfortable or wrong to your civilian mindset. Jessica nodded, though Sarah could see uncertainty in her eyes. Understand. I'm ready to learn. We'll see about that. First thing, forget everything you think you know about fighting. Most people have ideas about combat that come from Hollywood, and those ideas will get you killed in a real situation. Sarah moved to the center of the room and gestured for Jessica to join her. The most important thing to understand is that in a real attack, you're not trying to win a fight. You're trying to escape. Your goal is to create enough damage or distraction to get away, not to defeat your opponent. For the next hour, Sarah taught Jessica the basics of situational awareness, how to scan environments for potential threats, how to position herself near exits, how to trust her instincts when something felt wrong. These weren't techniques that required physical strength or speed, but they were perhaps the most important skills for staying safe. Most people walk around completely oblivious to their surroundings, Sarah explained as they practiced scanning exercises. They're looking at their phones, wearing headphones, thinking about what happened yesterday or what's happening tomorrow. That makes them perfect victims. Jessica proved to be a surprisingly good student. She asked intelligent questions, followed instructions carefully, and didn't complain when Sarah pushed her to repeat exercises until they became automatic. There was a hunger in her eyes that reminded Sarah of herself at a much younger age, desperate to learn anything that might help her survive in a dangerous world. As the morning progressed, they moved on to basic physical techniques. Sarah started with simple escape methods, how to break free from various grabs and holds using leverage and sudden movement rather than brute strength. The person attacking you expects you to pull away, Sarah demonstrated, allowing Jessica to grab her wrist. That's natural, but it's also what they're prepared for. Instead, you do something unexpected. She showed Jessica how to step into an attack rather than away from it, using the attacker's momentum against them. How to strike vulnerable points that would cause maximum pain and disorientation. How to move in ways that disrupted an opponent's balance and created opportunities for escape. Jessica struggled at first, her movements tentative and overthought. Years of being told to be polite and non-confrontational had conditioned her to avoid any kind of physical aggression, even in practice. "You're thinking too much," Sarah said after Jessica failed to properly execute a wrist escape for the 5th time. In a real situation, you won't have time to think through each step. The movement has to be instinctive. "But what if I hurt someone?" Jessica asked, voicing the concern that was clearly holding her back. Sarah stopped the exercise and looked directly at her student. If someone is attacking you, they've already decided that your safety doesn't matter to them. You don't owe them consideration for their well-being. Your only obligation is to yourself and getting home safely. The words hit harder than Sarah had intended, and she saw Jessica flinch slightly. But they were necessary words, ones that Sarah had needed to hear herself many years ago when she was learning that the world wasn't always kind to people who played by the rules. They took a break for water and to let Jessica process what she was learning. She sat against the mirrored wall, looking thoughtful and slightly overwhelmed. "Is it always this intense?" Jessica asked. "The training, I mean." "Real life is intense," Sarah replied. "If I teach you techniques that only work when you're calm and prepared, I'm doing you a disservice. You need to be able to react properly when you're scared, confused, and running on adrenaline. Is that what happened to you? Did you have to learn all this because something bad happened?" Sarah caught herself before answering, remembering their agreement about not discussing her background. But she could see that Jessica was asking not out of idle curiosity, but because she was trying to understand the mindset behind what she was learning. "Let's just say that everyone who gets serious about self-defense has their reasons," Sarah said diplomatically. "The important thing is that you're here now, learning skills that could save your life someday." They resumed training, focusing on what Sarah considered the 3 most important techniques for someone in Jessica's situation: a palm strike to the nose, a knee to the groin, and an elbow to the solar plexus. Simple, effective, and devastating when executed properly. These aren't fancy moves, Sarah explained as she demonstrated each technique. They don't require years of practice or perfect form, but they'll stop most attackers long enough for you to get away. Jessica practiced each technique repeatedly, first in slow motion to understand the mechanics, then at increasing speed until her movements began to look natural. Sarah was impressed by how quickly she picked up the fundamentals, though she knew that real competence would require months of regular practice. Near the end of their session, Sarah introduced what she considered the most important lesson of all: the psychology of violence. Most people freeze when they're attacked because they can't believe it's actually happening, she explained. They waste precious seconds trying to reason with their attacker or hoping someone else will intervene. By the time they decide to fight back, it's often too late. She had Jessica practice what she called flipping the switch, the mental process of instantly shifting from normal social mode to combat mode when threatened. It was one of the hardest things to teach because it went against every instinct civilized society had trained into people. The moment someone puts their hands on you without permission, they've declared war, Sarah said bluntly. You don't negotiate with them, you don't try to talk them out of it, you don't worry about being polite. You respond with immediate and overwhelming force. Jessica nodded, but Sarah could see she was struggling with the concept. It would take time and practice for someone with Jessica's background to truly internalize the idea that sometimes violence was not only acceptable, but necessary. As they finished their session and began packing up equipment, Jessica surprised Sarah with an observation that showed she was understanding more than just the physical techniques. This isn't really about fighting, is it? She said. It's about mindset, about refusing to be a victim. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile Jessica had seen from her all morning. Now you're getting it. The physical techniques are important, but they're useless without the right mental attitude. Most attackers are looking for easy targets, people who won't fight back effectively. If you can project confidence and readiness to defend yourself, you'll avoid most potential confrontations entirely. They arranged to meet again the following Saturday, and Jessica promised to practice the techniques they had covered during the week. As they prepared to leave, she turned to Sarah with an expression of gratitude that was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," Jessica said simply. "I know you're taking a risk by helping me, and I want you to know that I take that seriously. Your secret is safe with me." Sarah nodded, hoping she had made the right decision. As they parted ways in the parking lot, she reflected on how strange it felt to be teaching someone else the skills that had once defined her entire existence. She had thought that part of her life was over, buried beneath years of careful normalcy. But standing in that old gym, watching Jessica struggle and then succeed with techniques that could someday save her life, Sarah realized that maybe her past didn't have to be a secret shame. Maybe it could be something more constructive, a way to help others find the strength and confidence they needed to navigate a dangerous world. For the first time in months, she found herself looking forward to something other than just getting through another day of high school routine. She was a teacher now, and that felt like a purpose worth pursuing. 3 weeks into their training sessions, Sarah noticed a significant change in Jessica's demeanor at school. The girl who had once walked with hunched shoulders and nervous glances now carried herself with quiet confidence. She made eye contact when speaking to people, stood straighter in the hallways, and seemed more relaxed during conversations. The transformation wasn't dramatic enough to attract unwanted attention, but Sarah could see the difference in someone who was learning to trust in her own ability to handle dangerous situations. Their Saturday morning sessions had become the highlight of Sarah's week. She discovered that she genuinely enjoyed teaching, finding satisfaction in watching Jessica master techniques that had once seemed impossible to her. More importantly, she appreciated having someone to talk to who understood the serious nature of self-defense training, even if Jessica didn't know the full extent of Sarah's background. During their 4th session, while practicing advanced escape techniques, Jessica asked a question that caught Sarah off guard. "Have you ever actually had to use these skills for real?" Jessica asked during a water break. I mean, not in training or sparring, but in an actual life or death situation. Sarah's hands stilled on her water bottle. It was a reasonable question from a student to an instructor, but it touched on territory she had promised herself never to discuss with anyone from her new life. That's getting into background territory, Sarah said carefully. I know. I'm not asking for details. It's just, sometimes when you demonstrate a technique, there's something in your eyes, like you're remembering something specific. It makes the training feel more real, more urgent. Sarah realized that Jessica was more observant than she had given her credit for. The girl was picking up on subtle cues that most people would miss entirely. It was both impressive and concerning. Let's just say that everyone who takes self-defense seriously has their reasons, Sarah replied, echoing her earlier response. The important thing is that you're learning skills that work, not where I learned them. Jessica nodded, accepting the boundary, but Sarah could see the curiosity still burning in her eyes. It was becoming harder to maintain the mystery around her background, especially as their training relationship deepened into something approaching friendship. The following Monday at school, Sarah was walking to her locker between classes when she noticed a commotion near the main office. Two men in dark suits were speaking with Principal Henderson, their body language suggesting official business rather than a casual visit. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the type: federal agents, probably FBI or military intelligence, with the unmistakable bearing of people accustomed to authority and secrets. She quickly changed direction, ducking into a nearby bathroom and pulling out her phone. Her hands shook slightly as she dialed a number she had hoped never to use again. "This is Martinez," she said when the call connected. "I think we have a problem." The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "What kind of problem?" "There are federal agents at my school. I don't know what they want, but their presence here can't be a coincidence." There was a pause before the response came. "Are you certain of their identity?" "Positive. Two men, late 30s, government-issue suits and haircuts. They're talking to my principal right now." "Understood. Do not return to your normal routine. Leave the building immediately and go to the secondary safe house. We'll initiate contact protocols and find out what's happening." Sarah ended the call and deleted it from her phone's history, her mind racing through possibilities. It had been 2 years since her extraction from active duty, 2 years since she had officially died in a classified operation that never happened. Someone very determined and very connected had managed to track her to this suburban high school. She was about to leave through a side exit when Jessica appeared around the corner, her face flushed with excitement. "Sarah, there you are. You'll never believe what just happened. 2 FBI agents came to talk to Principal Henderson about you. They're asking questions about your background," and Sarah grabbed Jessica's arm and pulled her into the empty bathroom, checking to make sure they were alone before responding. "What exactly did they ask?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp with urgency. "They wanted to know how long you've been enrolled here, whether you've had any disciplinary problems, who you associate with. Principal Henderson seemed confused because your records are really limited. They also asked about any unusual incidents involving you." Sarah's heart sank. If federal agents were asking about unusual incidents, someone must have reported the locker room confrontation with Jessica. But how had that information reached people with the clearance to track down a former special operations soldier who was supposed to be dead? "Jessica, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Sarah said, gripping the girl's shoulders. "Whatever is happening here, it's dangerous. Not just for me, but potentially for anyone associated with me. You need to stay away from me until this is resolved." "What are you talking about? What kind of danger?" Sarah looked into Jessica's eyes and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "The kind of danger that comes from my past catching up with me. The kind that doesn't care about innocent bystanders." "Your past? Sarah, who are you really?" Before Sarah could answer, they heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Sarah moved to the door and peered through the small window, seeing the 2 agents walking past with Principal Henderson. They appeared to be heading toward her locker. "I have to go," Sarah said, turning back to Jessica. "Remember what I taught you about situational awareness. If anything unusual happens in the next few days, If you notice anyone following you, if strangers start asking questions about me, if anything at all feels wrong, you call this number immediately." She pressed a piece of paper into Jessica's hand with a phone number written on it. "This connects to people who can help protect you if necessary. But, Sarah, you have to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll forget about our training sessions. Forget about the gym. Forget about everything I taught you. If anyone asks, we barely know each other. Can you do that?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I promise. But, Sarah, whatever trouble you're in, maybe I can help. My father has connections, money." "Your father's connections are exactly what could make things worse," Sarah said gently. "This isn't the kind of problem that money or lawyers can solve." She moved to the window again and saw that the hallway was empty. "I'm leaving now. Give me 5 minutes before you come out. Will I see you again?" Sarah paused at the door, looking back at the girl who had inadvertently become both her student and her friend. "I don't know. I hope so, but I honestly don't know." She slipped out of the bathroom and made her way quickly to the side exit, avoiding the main hallways where the agents might still be conducting their investigation. Her car was parked in a student lot 2 blocks away, a precaution she had maintained even during her most complacent moments. As she drove toward the safe house, Sarah's mind worked through the implications of what was happening. Someone with significant resources had connected her current identity to her former life, despite the extensive precautions taken during her extraction. That meant either her cover had never been as solid as she believed, or someone from her past had deliberately revealed her location. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in an older part of the city, rented under one of several backup identities she maintained. She parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, checking for surveillance as she moved through quiet residential streets. Inside the sparsely furnished apartment, she activated a secure communication device that she had hoped never to use again. Within minutes, she was connected to her former handler, a woman known only as Control who had managed Sarah's most sensitive operations. "Martinez, what's your status?" Control's voice was as calm and professional as ever. "Blown. Federal agents at my school asking questions. I'm at secondary safe house awaiting instructions. We've been monitoring chatter about unusual activity in your area. Someone has been asking questions through unofficial channels about former special operations personnel who went dark approximately 2 years ago. Any idea who?" "Several possibilities. Your former unit was involved in operations that made enemies at the highest levels. It's possible that someone has decided to tie up loose ends." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the apartment's poor heating. "What are my options?" "We can extract you again. New identity, new location, complete break from your current life. You'd be operational again within 72 hours. And my civilian contacts?" "Standard protocol. Anyone who knows your current identity would need to be evaluated for security risk. If they're determined to be compromised or unreliable, appropriate measures would be taken." Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized what that meant. Jessica, who had accidentally stumbled on her secret, would be considered a security risk. The girl who had just wanted to learn self-defense could end up paying with her life for Sarah's carelessness. "I need time to think," Sarah said. "You have 6 hours. After that, we initiate emergency protocols regardless of your preference. Too much attention on this situation puts other assets at risk." The connection terminated, leaving Sarah alone in the sparse apartment with an impossible choice. She could disappear again, leaving behind the normal life she had worked so hard to build, or she could try to handle the situation herself and risk exposing other covert operators. But there was a third option, one that terrified her more than either extraction or exposure. She could stop running and face whatever forces were hunting her, using skills she had hoped never to need again. It would mean abandoning any pretense of being a normal teenager and returning to the world where violence was a language and survival required constant vigilance. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the apartment's bare walls, Sarah made her decision. She wasn't ready to disappear again, and she wasn't willing to let innocent people pay for her past. If someone wanted to hunt her, she would give them exactly what they were looking for, but on her terms, not theirs. For the first time in 2 years, Sarah began planning an operation. And for the first time since leaving active duty, she felt truly alive. Sarah spent the next 3 hours transforming from a high school student back into the operative she had once been. She retrieved equipment from hidden caches around the city, gear she had stashed during her initial settlement period but never expected to use. Communications devices, surveillance equipment, and weapons that legally didn't exist were carefully arranged in the safe house as she planned her next moves. Her first priority was gathering intelligence on who was hunting her and why. Using skills she had hoped to forget, Sarah hacked into local law enforcement databases to track the movements of the federal agents who had visited her school. What she found confirmed her worst fears. They weren't legitimate FBI or military intelligence. Their credentials were sophisticated forgeries, and their presence in Denver coincided with several other official visits to locations connected to former Special Operations personnel. Someone was systematically tracking down members of her old unit, using official cover to legitimize their investigation. The fact that they had found her meant they had resources that rivaled those of the government agencies they were impersonating. Her secure phone rang as she was finishing her research. The display showed a number she didn't recognize, but the encryption protocols indicated it was from someone with access to her former unit's communication systems. "Martinez here," she answered cautiously. "Thank God you're alive," said a voice she recognized immediately. Tommy Chun, her former teammate, and one of the few people who knew about her extraction. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 days." "Tommy? How did you get this number?" "Same way someone else got your location." "Sarah, we have a serious problem. Someone is hunting the survivors from Operation Blackwater, and they're not interested in taking prisoners." Sarah's blood ran cold. Operation Blackwater had been their unit's final mission, the classified operation that had officially never happened. It had also been the reason for her extraction. They had discovered evidence of high-level corruption that put their lives at risk. "How many are left?" she asked. "Out of the original 8-person team, you, me, and Rodriguez. Everyone else has been eliminated over the past 6 months. Made it look like accidents or suicides, but I know better. Who's behind it? That's what I've been trying to figure out. Best guess is a Senator Patricia Morrison. Remember the evidence we gathered about the arms deals she was facilitating? The ones we were ordered to forget about." Sarah remembered. They had uncovered proof that Morrison was using her position on the Senate Intelligence Committee to arrange illegal weapons sales to conflict zones, pocketing millions in the process. When their unit reported the discovery, they were told to destroy the evidence and never speak of it again. Most of them had been reassigned to different units within days. "She's running for president now," Tommy continued. "If our evidence ever came to light, it would destroy her campaign and probably land her in federal prison. Apparently, she's decided it's safer to eliminate anyone who might remember what we found." "How do they track me?" "Same way they found the others. Financial records, cell phone data, facial recognition software. You can hide from the government for a while, but when someone with Morrison's resources wants to find you, they eventually will." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If Morrison was eliminating witnesses to protect her political ambitions, then Jessica and anyone else who knew about Sarah's abilities could be considered collateral damage. "Tommy, I may have compromised civilians. There's a girl at my school who knows I have advanced training. If they decide she's a security risk, then she's already dead," Tommy finished grimly. "These people aren't taking any chances. Anyone connected to us is being eliminated as a potential threat." Sarah felt rage building in her chest, the cold, focused anger that had once made her one of the most effective operators in the Special Forces. She had tried to leave that world behind, but it seemed determined to drag her back in. "Where are you now?" she asked. "Safe house in Phoenix. Rodriguez is with me. We've been trying to decide whether to run or fight. I vote for fight. I'm tired of running, and I'm tired of letting other people pay for decisions we made in service to our country." "Sarah, think about what you're saying. Morrison has the resources of a major political campaign, plus whatever black ops contractor she's hired. Going up against her is essentially declaring war on one of the most powerful people in Washington." "Good," Sarah said coldly. Maybe it's time someone reminded these politicians that there are consequences for betraying the people who put their lives on the line to protect this country. After coordinating with Tommy and Rodriguez, Sarah put together a plan that would either end Morrison's threat permanently or get them all killed. But first, she had to protect the civilians who had been inadvertently drawn into the situation. She drove back toward the school, arriving just as afternoon classes were ending. Jessica emerged from the building with a group of friends, laughing about something that had happened in chemistry class. For a moment, Sarah envied her ability to worry about normal teenage concerns, oblivious to the deadly serious events unfolding around her. Sarah intercepted Jessica in the parking lot, pulling her aside for a conversation that would change everything. Jessica, I need you to listen carefully. You're in danger because of your association with me. The men who came to school today aren't real federal agents. They're killers hired by someone who wants to eliminate anyone who knows about my background. Jessica's face went pale. What are you talking about? This sounds like something out of a movie. I wish it were. Look at me, Jessica. Really look at me. Do you see someone who's making this up? Jessica studied Sarah's face and saw something there that chilled her to the bone. Gone was any pretense of being a normal teenager. The person standing before her radiated deadly competence and barely contained violence. Oh my God, Jessica whispered. You really were military, weren't you? Not just military, special forces. Navy SEALs, to be specific. 15 years, including operations that officially never happened. I was extracted 2 years ago after my unit discovered evidence of treason at the highest levels of government. Now, someone is eliminating everyone who was involved, and that includes anyone who might know enough to ask inconvenient questions. What do we do? Sarah was impressed that Jessica's first response was to ask what they could do rather than panic or deny the situation. It confirmed her assessment that the girl had the mental toughness to handle crisis situations. Your father's political connections, how deep do they go? Does he know people in Washington? Yes, he does defense contracting work. He knows senators, generals, people at the Pentagon. Why? Because I'm going to give you something that could save both our lives, but using it will put your family at risk. I need to know that your father is the kind of man who would do the right thing, even if it cost him business contracts. Jessica didn't hesitate. He is. Dad's made enemies by refusing to pay bribes or cut corners on safety. If you have evidence of corruption, he'll help expose it regardless of the consequences. Sarah handed her a small, encrypted drive. This contains evidence that Senator Patricia Morrison has been facilitating illegal arms sales for personal profit. My unit discovered it 2 years ago, and now she's having us killed to protect her presidential campaign. If anything happens to me, get this to your father and tell him to make it public. What do you mean if anything happens to you? Where are you going? To end this. Morrison has been hunting us for months, picking us off one by one. It's time to turn the tables and start hunting her. Jessica grabbed Sarah's arm. Take me with you. Absolutely not. This isn't a training exercise. Jessica, people are going to die tonight. And you're going to face them alone? Not alone. I have backup, other survivors for my unit. This is what we do, Jessica. It's what we were trained for. But you don't have to do it. You could run again, start over somewhere else. Sarah shook her head. Running just delays the inevitable. Morrison will keep hunting until all the witnesses are dead. The only way to stop her is to go on the offensive. She pulled Jessica into a quick, fierce hug. Take care of yourself. Use what I taught you. Trust your instincts. And remember that you're stronger than you think. Sarah, wait. But Sarah was already walking away, moving with the purposeful stride of someone heading into battle. Jessica watched her go, clutching the encrypted drive that contained enough evidence to destroy one of the most powerful politicians in the country. As Sarah drove toward the rendezvous point where Tommy and Rodriguez were waiting, she felt a familiar calm settling over her. The uncertainty and fear of the past few hours have been replaced by the focused clarity that came with having a clear mission and the skills to complete it. For 2 years, she had tried to be someone else, a normal teenager worried about homework and social drama. But tonight, she would remember who she really was, a warrior trained to eliminate threats to national security, no matter how powerful or well-protected they might be. Senator Patricia Morrison had made a fatal mistake when she decided to hunt Sarah Martinez. She was about to learn why the Navy SEALs had a reputation for being the most dangerous people on Earth when properly motivated. The girl who had walked the halls of Riverside High School was gone. In her place was a highly trained operative with 15 years of experience in lethal combat operations and a very personal score to settle. Morrison's hunters were about to become the hunted, and Sarah intended to remind them all why you should never corner a predator unless you're prepared to face the consequences.